Rockets fans, welcome to the Rockets Launch Pod, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets, Whoa! Sports Talk 790. Rockets! Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Rockets Launch Pod starts now.
Welcome aboard.
Ben DuBose here, Paulo, Alves there. Welcome back to the Rockets Launch Pod, presented by Clutch Fans and with support from Sports Talk 790, official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets. It's now Tuesday, the 11th of November. Happy Veterans Day, by the way. But from an NBA perspective, that means we are exactly 3 weeks into the new season. The Rockets are off to a 6-3 start. They've won 6 of their last 7 games overall, and they've now got this 3-day hiatus and a pretty long gap between that thrilling win that we saw on Sunday afternoon in Milwaukee and then their next game on Wednesday night versus the Washington Wizards. That game kicks off a 3-game homestand at Toyota Center in downtown Houston. And then if you want to hear about that Bucks game in particular, just hit up our archives. We had a post-game show right after with Dave Hardesty of Clutch Fans, which we put on our feeds at Rockets Launch Pod as well as on the Clutch Fans YouTube channel for the video version. For this show, we're going to talk a little bit more big picture, and we're actually going to be doing player and coach grades for both Ime Udoka and each of the 9 players who consistently plays for the Rockets. Those 9, of course, are the 4 entrenched starters with Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, Amen Thompson, and Jabari Smith Jr., as well as the other 5, which are typically a combination of Josh Okogie, Tari Eason, Steven Adams, Reed Shepherd, and Clint Capella. So the reason we're doing this, in addition to having a couple of off days in a row, we're actually now more than 10% of the way into the season, 9 out of 82. So while I know everything still feels new, and in the grand scheme it is, the sample is still relatively small, at the same time, it's also not nothing. We're getting to a point where I think we can at least make some big picture observations or at least comment on the trend lines. Now, full disclosure before we start, all of these grades are relative to realistic expectations for each player. And what I mean by that is if you grade Josh Okogie an A and Kevin Durant a B, or Clint Capella an A and Alperen Sengun a B, no, it doesn't mean you're saying Okogie is better than KD or that Capella is better than Sengun, and those grades are strictly hypotheticals. It's just saying relative to expectations for each player going into the year and the formula for what the Rockets need from these guys to potentially contend for a title this season, which we all know is the goal. And as far as that formula, we're not starting from scratch. Obviously, we knew quite a bit about all of these guys prior to that October 21st opener 3 weeks ago in Oklahoma City. And it would also be a pretty boring pod if we just went through the roster and graded based on each player's overall ability because, again, we pretty much already knew that, and there's no reason to wildly overreact to a sample of less than 10 games. So this exercise is just taking the temperature of where we're at now, what trends we're starting to see relative to expectations, that sort of stuff. So I'm going to start with Ime Udoka because I think going through the overall team framework, which it makes sense to do with Ime, will also help guide the discussions we have later on for some of the individual players. And as far as Ime's performance, I think you've got to start by looking at the overall numbers and the metrics. They're 6-3 right now, which is a 55-win pace. That's better than last year when they were 52-30, number 2 in the West. Strength of schedule to date is number 6 in the NBA, according to ESPN. That's as of our recording time on Monday night. And notably, their remaining strength of schedule is number 23, second easiest in the West. So that 6-3 pace, winning 2 out of every 3, they actually have an easier schedule moving forward the rest of the year. And that's before you consider bringing back Dorian Finney-Smith, continuing to integrate Kevin Durant, all that good stuff. You look at the net ratings and some of the advanced metrics, number 3 overall, number 1 on offense, number 8 on defense. So if anything, that 6-3 might be a little bit soft, and it could be a product of the schedule, all relatively close to good teams, 2 on the road to Oklahoma City and San Antonio, and 1 at home to Detroit, that home opener the first week of the season. So if anything, I would argue that the 6-3 start might be underselling them a little bit when you look at the productivity under the hood. And so with that in mind, I would give Ime Udoka an A-. Now, I'm not giving him an A or an A plus because there are some nitpicks you can point out. The defense to this point, it's not quite as good as last year. Dropped from number 5 to number 8. You can question if they're running too much zone. You can, on offense, talk about the turnovers, although I think some of that is personnel since they don't have Fred VanVleet. I think a lot of defense is personnel as well, but if you want to point to Ime being a defensive coach, I suppose you can. It is fair to note the downturn, regardless of the reason. The one criticism that I think is fair, and it's a small criticism when you look at overall and the good clearly outweighing the bad, but the three-point math, they rank number 1 in the NBA in three-point accuracy, and they are dead last in three-point attempts. Now, the good news against Milwaukee, it was a little bit closer to parity. I think they put up 26, the Bucks put up 29. But in these games where, like the San Antonio one, where you're putting up about 30 and the other team is putting up 45, that makes it really tough from a math perspective. So I think they've got to get better at putting up more threes at volume. I suspect Ime already knows that. Getting back another shooter in Dorian Finney-Smith, who was at 41% last year, that would certainly help. But it's again, on a team that's very good overall, it is a fair nitpick. And so to this point, that and the fact that they're on a 55 win pace as opposed to 60 plus, that's enough for me to give Ime an A minus rather than an A or an A plus. But overall, like, you can't argue with the results, given the Dorian Finney-Smith injury, given the loss of Fred VanVleet before training camp, the integration of Kevin Durant. Anyone who says they wouldn't take 6-3 with these under the hood metrics, I don't think is being realistic. So I think overall you have to be pleased with the job the Rockets are doing in the big picture, the macro, which is what a head coach is charged with managing. And then in contrast to last year, I think one other thing we should note, Ime is getting this done while still developing the young guys. You're still getting a ton of on-ball reps and opportunities for Amen Thompson and Reed Shepherd. So it's in contrast to last year where by this point they were already sort of phasing out Reed Shepherd and giving more minutes to Aaron Holiday. And we've talked about why last year the team had a much smaller margin for error. They had to squeeze out every margin to get to 52 wins. And so they couldn't err on the side of playing a high variance prospect like Reed Shepherd. Well, this year they are, and they're being rewarded. The last 2 games against the Spurs and the Bucks, Reed was absolutely fantastic. He's grown by leaps and bounds since the first week of the year. So in contrast to last year, where Ime leaned on the steady veteran hand of an Aaron Holiday, this year he's getting the results that clearly the Rockets want as a contender, while also giving responsibilities to young guys who are still getting better, especially so in the case of Reed Shepherd. So both in terms of the big picture winning games, which with the 37-year-old Kevin Durant is certainly important, but also, the overall goal of winning games while developing your young talent. I think so far Ime is striking the right balance. He's helping this team succeed on multiple fronts. And so because of that, I can't justify anything lower than a grade in the A's. I'll give him an A minus because of the math discrepancy, but for me, anything lower than that is just not warranted based on the results. What's your grade for Ime Udoka and the overall Rockets performance through 9 games?
I don't think so. My grade for Ime's performance, for the Rockets' performance, and my grade for Ime are not going to match.
Okay.
And I'll explain a little bit in a bit, and it's probably going to sound pretty jarring, but as far as how the Rockets have performed, I'm going to give it a B. As far as how Ime has performed, I'm going to give it a C.
Ooh,
And
Jesus.
it might sound a bit harsh on Ime especially, but as you said, it's relative to expectations. And when we look at the record and the expected and what games you were expected to win, games you were expected to lose, I think the Rockets have basically lost every game that I expected to be close to a 50-50 before the season started. Now, since then, we've found out that the Bucks are a better team than I expected them to be, right? But I can't give too good of a grade when, even though the metrics look good, the record, it's not a bad record at all. It's still a good record. But it's basically you've lost all, to me, what would be 50-50, then you've won of the games that you should have won. Beside the Bucks one, but once again, compared to expectations preseason. And then it's also about, while I do think that the offense is impressive, and I was not expecting the offense to be this good, I'm not sure how much of that you can credit to Udoka compared to just having, just leaps from everybody on everybody else. And yes, the Rockets do scheme themselves open really often, and they do a good job of leveraging up and KD into opportunities for the other guys. And there's a lot of more crisp passing and a lot more fundamental basketball that's going a lot better. Some of that's also the hot shooting. We'll see how that develops. But I do kind of the reason my Rockets grade and my Ime Udoka grade are different is mostly because of who I credit the offensive, I guess, blow up to. I credit it more to the players than to the staff. That may be unfair, who knows? Just because of that. It's also because, as in on basically every platform, the defense is not looked up to par. And I know it rates as a top 10 defense, right? But it's just night and day from what we saw last season. And what I expected this team to be was a team that was, really good defensively that now got a closer. So still scrappy team that, kept the game closer. Then down the stretch, they would be able to get stops, and KD would be prolific enough of a scorer that with all the stops that we got, we would win games. And I still believe that that's probably the recipe for success with this team down the line. And I do believe that we'll eventually get there. But since I do believe that we'll eventually get there, I need to give space in my grade for it to get better for Ime as that improvement happens, which I think it will. If I gave Ime an A already and then our defense got a lot better, then I would have no space for him to get better, to make my grade better either, right? So, yeah, it's mostly crediting the offense a little bit more to the players than to Ime himself. And then just thinking that I think this team has a long ways to go defensively. And as I still believe what I said last pod, that they're not maximizing right now their chances of winning every single game. And that's okay. But if I give too high of a grade now, how am I going to leave space for when they do maximize those things and those schemes and the guys they have in the rotation? How am I going to keep them a high grade if I already start too high? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that's fair enough. For me, I'm more generous because I put a lot of weight on taking care of business and taking care of business by large margins, the Dallas game excluded. I think you wanted that signature win, and I would argue they got it yesterday against Milwaukee. But to your point on preseason expectations, I guess that's fair. And it is in the relatively recent aftermath of their most disappointing showing, which was that game in San Antonio where starting at about the 3-minute mark of the second quarter, they were severely outplayed. So I can understand it. It's just, for me, when I look at all the moving parts and, I try and adjust for the absences, the integration, the metrics that show how they played on the balance, I think they're going to be fine. But some of that is probably me projecting. And so if you squint hard enough and if you want to, as you said, leave room for further bumps and you have high expectations for this team, which are warranted, then I guess I can see where you're coming from. Let's move on to players, because I think there's potential for a lot of variance there. And we'll alternate who picks the player. We're not going to go in any specific order. I'm going to go with the guy who I might have one of my lower grades for, just to sort of mix it up and be in contrast to the relatively rosy grade I gave to Ime Udoka. I'm going to start with Amen Thompson, and I'm going to give him a C+. I can't give him any lower than that because he is third in net rating on the team. Like, he's clearly still contributing to winning, but relative to expectations, the overall shooting is down, the three-point shooting is down, the true shooting is down by a decent bit. The defensive metrics aren't what they were a year ago when he was all defensive first team. And yeah, I know, small sample, he's still contributing to winning. But for a player that a lot of us looked at before the year and said this could be the third wheel of a big three, he hasn't been consistently anywhere near the level of Kevin Durant or Alperen Sengun. And those were all-stars last year. So not saying that he should be quite at that tier, but the gap between them is a little bit wider than I think we wanted to think, and perhaps even the Rockets wanted to think, given how highly they view Amen internally. And he is just 22 years old. We're talking about the first 9 games of year 3, and there are some extenuating circumstances. The opener against the Thunder, his defense, I thought, looked really good against SGA the first 3 quarters, and then he had the calf cramps. Perhaps that's been a lingering factor. He's gotten in foul trouble and had a rough whistle in a couple of games. He's had the added responsibility of being the point guard. Now, his assists have risen a little bit, but his turnovers have jumped by about the same proportion, so I don't necessarily give him a bump for that. But you can argue that since he's the point guard, does that, compromise him a little bit because it takes more juice to bring the ball up the floor? So he can't defend as aggressively. He doesn't have as many off-ball opportunities. I mean, maybe, I guess you can argue that, but at the end of the day, the production just isn't to this point what it was last season. So at least in terms of the efficiency. Now, we've seen it in flashes. He was very good, in my opinion, the best player on the floor in that when they had at Memphis last week by 15 plus points. So it's not as if there aren't positives. The first half against the Mavs, the game before that, he was really good. He has the potential to feast off the gravity of Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun. So there's a path for him to get a lot better in the near future. I hope he does. My guess is that it's a combination of, he's adjusting to being the starting point guard for the first time. He's dealt with calf cramps from time to time. Like, there's just a lot of little things that have happened. And he's played a lot of really physical, long shot blockers, Daniel Gafford, Victor Wembanyama, the combination of Giannis and Miles Turner with Milwaukee. And so that's made him at times reluctant to drive all the way to the rim. I think it's sort of a perfect storm of circumstances, but regardless of the reason you want to ascribe it to, I think it's fair to say that Amen has not been as good as we had hoped. And as time progresses, I think he will be. I think, as Reed continues to improve, if Reed gets more minutes at point guard, then perhaps unlocking more of Amen as an off-ball guy will play into it. This is not me panicking on Amen. I'm still very bullish on him. All I'm saying is that for a guy that we personally and the team internally had very high expectations of going into this year, the start it hasn't been bad, but it's just been okay. It's not bad. He's still contributing to winning. He's the third best in net rating, but it hasn't been great either. So I'm at C+ for Amen Thompson. Paulo, what's your grade for him?
On Amen, I'm actually going to be a little bit more optimistic, and not really optimistic, but I'll give him like a rosier grade than you are. I think going into the season, first of all, my grade, I'm going to give him a B-. Going into the season, actually didn't have expectations as high for Amen because I did think that the ceiling was better. He could be really, really good. But at the same time, I know when we've seen, especially throughout this rebuild, we've seen how hard it is for people to take on big usage when they're really young, and still remain, somewhat efficient and not be really turnover prone and stuff like that. So my expectations were measured already. And then at the same time, it's that combined with, okay, seeing how this team plays, I no longer think that a man needs to be a Russell Westbrook type for this team to be good offensively. I think we have a really good balance going on where we have KD and Sengun as the shot creators, and the man doesn't really need to do that much off the dribble. And what he's going to need to do going forward, I think he's going to be more connective passing and more using his athleticism combined with his IQ to be in place, to put himself in positions to be a play finisher, whether cuttings, dunker spot, stuff like that. And just being kind of a pressure valve for Sengun and KD, in which these guys are getting doubled, right? The ball is going to have to find itself to someone. And more likely than not, the man is not going to be the guy sitting in the corner. He's going to be the guy being the outlet for that pressure that has to make that quick, snappy decision to capitalize on that double and not allow the defense to recover. Right. And considering that that's what I think the man is going to need to be as we go further into the season, that was some point guard duties and some level of, if I have a mismatch and I'm going to be able to punish it. I do think he will be able to. I'm actually not that low, I guess, or middling in the men's grade. There are some things that bother me, especially his free throw percentage. I don't know why, because there's games where he'll go 6 for 6 and the free throws all look good. Like him shooting the free throws doesn't look like someone who should have as low of a percentage as he does. Like there's some times where his free throws just look automatic. And I think when he misses, it's a lot to do with either being tired or being banged up from being fouled or playing physical defense down on the other end. It feels like he just off rhythm rather than him, actually not being a good free throw shooter. I think if you gave a man 100 tries of free throws in practice right now, I think, or not really in practice, but still game setting, right? But he's not exhausted while shooting them. I think he would probably make 80% plus, because I think he's really consistent. The only problem is sometimes it looks like he's like kind of banged up from his style of play, and it kind of throws off, either his rhythm or like his breathing seems off. It just seems like something is off. It's not necessarily him being bad at free throw shooting. That's one of the things that's been bothering me. The other thing that's been bothering me is that because we've given him more uses offensively, it really feels like his defense is not as much of a game changer as it was last season. Not saying he's playing bad defense. It just feels like there's some uncharacteristic mistakes and some overshooting on closeouts and stuff like that. I'm not really used to him making those mistakes, and less of the highlight plays of him coming off weak side or him affecting more than one player at the same in the same possession, in the same drive sometimes. I feel like that's taking a step back. But at the same time, I do think that it's not easy for a player to go from 14 points per game to 17.6 points per game. And this is considering the two underwhelming games he's had the last two games, right? Before that, he was close to 18.5 or something like that. Like, that's a massive jump. It may not seem like a lot, but you go and look historically, for a guy that already averaged 14 points per game, unless you're like a scoring guard, it's really hard to take a leap that big, I guess, without being kind of labeled as a scorer, which Amen really isn't. And then beyond that, I think a lot of people are, yes, he's had some bad turnovers, and sometimes they kind of come, one after the other, and it can get frustrating, and they are all bunched up in the same games. He's still averaging 5.3 assists to put 2.7 turnovers. It's not quite a 2-to-1 turnover ratio, but it's a better turnover ratio than he had last season. Like, he's only averaging, 0.7 turnovers more than he did last season, and he's averaging 1.5 assists more. And I do think that this stat line is also deflated, I guess, from the last couple of games where it was rougher than the game before that. So I do think some people, not saying that's you, but a lot of people are kind of putting it all on Amen with this discussion that we've had and we'll continue to have throughout the season. I really don't think the problem is the offense. And, even with the turnovers, and I do understand that turnovers make it harder to play defense, but I do think that the problem, if there is one, if we're trimming edges here, I don't think the problem is on offense at all. I think the problem is more so on defense, and I can live with Amen's turnovers, considering the reps that he's getting, and he's going to get better as the season goes along. More so than I can live with kind of a defensive and sometimes rebounding effort that we've had the last few games. So I don't put our shortcomings, I guess, if there's not really a lot of them, on the men as much as some other people do. And so a B- seems like a fair grade to me. Moving on from Amen, who was your first guy, I'm going to, just with the expression, just take the bull by the horns, and I'm going to go straight to Alperen Sengun. LP to me has had an awesome season. I think it's not necessarily because he's been overly efficient. That he's sitting at something like 58% true shooting, which is better than last season, but still not that great for a center. It's good. It's not great. He's still shooting 49% from the field. I know he's taking some more threes, but I do think on twos, he's had some rough games. But all in all, my grade for him is an A. Not necessarily because of his overall play, which I do think has been awesome. I think that would be a B. It's an A because I did not expect, and I know I saw it at Eurobasket, but I did not expect the shooting to be real. And the shooting is very much real at this point. And so the touch is back, but that's something that I already expected, so I can't predict it too much. But it just feels like he's arrived. Like, he's a bona fide starter now. Like, there's nothing you can say. There's no kind of holes in his game. I know he's not the best offensive center, but he's still good. And he's now finishing at the rim. His mid-range looks a lot better, especially down the stretch. He's getting to the rim at will. I know some of that is because he's playing with KD and there's more space, but he's gone up to what I think it's over 7 assists a game. Yeah, he's at 7.3 assists a game, and I would not be surprised if that went up. He's sitting at 23 points per game, and I would not be surprised if that went up as well. For reference, his highest scoring season was 21 up to this point, so he's 2 points over what his career high is, and I still think that he's going to score more. I do think that there's been just some games where it does not feel like Alperen Sengun is taking over high usage type of role. He is key, and when he gets the ball, he is really effective. But it hasn't felt like, okay, we're squeezing as much out of Sengun as we can. I think if we had a playoff series right now, Sengun would be getting the ball a lot more than he's been getting up to this point. So I do think that there's margin for progression there, not necessarily from him getting better, but just from the game plan eventually shifting as games become more and more important. So from Sengun's part, like 39% from three on not a not meaningless amount of threes. I think he's at shooting 3 threes a game is a massive improvement. Completely changes the dynamic of the team offensively. Gives him a lot more space when he's riding and attacking closeouts. And then there's been a marked increase in assists that has come with more turnovers, but I do think that those turnovers will come down as well. I don't think he's going to end the season at 3.7 turnovers a game. I think he might end the season like 8 assists and like 3.2 turnovers a game, and that's an elite assist to turnover ratio. So yeah, I do say that opportunities to take a huge leap. I think just some overhauling of his game with the new 3-point shooting is there. He's gotten better at free throws as well. And even though he was better than he is now at the start of the season, there's been some regression there. But yeah, I think Alperen Sengun has gone from hopeful all-star to bona fide, I'm going to be an all-star for the next, 10 years in this league.
Yeah.
And I am someone who, like the Rockets last season, there was a fight to see, okay, who's going to be the best player on this team, who's going to be a star. Obviously, we got KD, so it's arguable who the best player on the team is, but it's not because we're leveling by, the below level. No, it's because we have two guys who are already there. Like right now, we have 2 superstars. And that's, we haven't had one superstar ever since Game Sombin left.
Yeah,
He's just a superstar now.
Yeah, I'm going to be boring and go with an A as well. I will note that with the 3-point shooting, he's at 39%, but a lot of that is propped up by the opener in Oklahoma City. I still think there's a lot to be learned there. But the fact that the free throw shooting is up from 69 to 74, and also the free throw attempts, the fact that he's now drawing 7.8 per game instead of 5.6, that's a bump between that and the overall efficiency going up that tells you it's real. He's getting smarter. He's developing. And, just as I said in giving Amen a C+, that, he's not quite, in my opinion, holding his weight thus far in terms of the formula, the big three. Well, it's being offset by Alperen Sengun. The only reason why I'm not giving him an A+ is, the 2-point shooting is still at about 51%. The true shooting, as you mentioned, it's good, but it's not great. 58.3. It's more in line with year 3 and not when he dipped to 54.5 last year. But I also think that Sengun is really limited by not having a traditional point guard. Like, he doesn't get any of the pick and roll opportunities that he got last year with Fred VanVleet, which at one point was his bread and butter. And yet for him to still find a way to produce at this level and many times initiating the offense, as we saw late in the game against Milwaukee, this is a superstar. I'm right there in agreement with you. And the net ratings don't lie. Like I mentioned, the Rockets have the number 3 net rating in the NBA, obviously number 1 on offense. The Rockets with Sengun, the on versus off court differential is more than 20 points. It's staggering. That is superstar level impact. And honestly, you could argue for an A+. I'm just going to say A to give a little bit of room for further improvements because, it could be that the 39% from 3 is realistic. I'm not quite there yet, but I hope it is. We'll see what happens over the larger sample. And I think the 2-point shooting will go up with time. Again, I think a lot of what's going on is that it's sort of an apples to oranges comparing to previous years where he doesn't have Fred VanVleet to get him some easier touches. I do think that Sengun's touch near the rim has improved relative to past years. He's just not getting the in-between shots at the rate and, I guess, the level of openness that he often did when it was Fred spoon-feeding him and it was a shot they could get in rhythm. So I think there's some adjustments going on there, and I think he will improve. But yeah, if a guy has a net rating differential of more than 20 at his usage, I don't see how it can't be at least an A. So yeah, I'll go A for Alperen Sengun. And I'll transition to a guy who I think is really easy. We can go really quick on this one. Josh Okogie, A+. I'm sorry. To me, it's simple. If you're a minimum signing and we know the defense he plays with, he's a positive net ratings guy, knows his limitations, and right now he's shooting 50% on threes. So for me, it's pretty simple. Josh Okogie has been a high-level defender in the NBA for a very long time. The question has been, how well can he shoot from 3? Last year, he had that career year at 35%. The question is how sustainable it would be. To this point, he's built on that. Now, am I saying I expect the 50% to continue? No, of course not. There's going to be some regression. But grading it 9 games in, if you get the level of defense you get from Josh Okogie, the awareness, in contrast to Tari Eason, who's also shooting well for 3, but we know Tari at times can sort of do a little bit too much. Now, he's gotten better at that this year, talking a little bit more about his career there. But Josh always stays within himself, high IQ. If you combine his defense on the perimeter with shooting 50% from three, relative to the expectations, the contract, for me, that's clearly A+. It's an easy one. Paulo, I'll let you give whatever grade you want to give to Josh, and then you can pick the next.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go too long on Josh Okogie. I don't think that there's much that can be said. He's a role player. He shoots threes and he plays defense. And the expectation going into the season was just that he was going to play defense, and now he's shooting threes at 60%.
And he's starting. Like, that speaks
Yeah, he is. Yeah, exactly. I do think that there's some no Dorian Finney-Smith role to that, but yes, he is starting, and you just gotta go with it. Relative to expectations, the expectation was probably that he wasn't going to be in the rotation, and now he not only is, he's starting and he is, balling out. So not going to go too deep into what Josh Okogie has done. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You talked about it. An A+ for me. He might get the best grade out of me, even though he's obviously not our best player. You talked about that earlier. But moving on, I'm going to go with Jabari Smith Jr., who's someone who I've been talking about a bunch on basically every platform that I've been on, and that's talked about on this podcast so far as well, including preseason. There's a leap that has been a leap with Jabari Smith Jr. offensively. It's not just that he's making more shots. It's not just he's being more aggressive. It's the complete package. He's just an overall better player offensively at every single part of the offense than he was last season. He's better handling the ball. He's better attacking closeouts. He's better generating his own shot. He's better shooting threes. He's better shooting mid-range shots. He's better getting to the rim. He's just a more complete player. And the more time passes, the closer he comes to more of a Cam Johnson, Michael Porter Jr. type, then he becomes to a, I don't know, maybe Otto Porter or someone like a really lengthy forward that can shoot threes. I guess Otto Porter a little bit more of a bad. But Robert Covington type, I'll call it that. He's more and more going away from being a 3 in the wing and more being just a complete forward that happens to be whose best attributes happen to be shooting and defense. And so also on didn't quite show last game, but there's that pop-off game where he has 4 blocks, and that has to get you excited because Jabari is still really young. There's still a lot of development to be done there, and if some of that development is him becoming a better, and he's shown flashes throughout the last 2 years of him becoming a better weak side shot blocker, then I think that bodes really, really well for a team that has Alperen Sengun, who's gotten better, but he's not necessarily a high flyer. He's more of someone who's going to body up and then have guys change their paths rather than being someone who's just, recovering. Even though he can do that, he's shown plenty of athleticism, but I just think even though it's not a necessity anymore from a concept stand, I think go next to a shot blocker at the 4 or a weak side rim protector at the 4, that doesn't change the fact that it would still be nice to have one. And if Jabari can become that, I think that's massive. Oh, I didn't quite give him a grade, did I? As far as the grade goes, I'm going to go with an A-. I'm not going to give him an A+ because there's been some gameplays kind of disappeared. But I'm going to leave it at that. And I do think that there was one more thing I was going to talk about, but I believe that's something you were going to touch about, his confidence and shooting through mistakes. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to give him a B+. The individual statistics are right in line with what you would expect. About 14 points, 44% overall, 37% from 3. And yeah, I think if you looked at the individual stats in a vacuum, you'd say it's what you expect from Jabari Smith Jr., winning role player. And so if it's sort of in line with expectations, I would personally go B. But the reason I go B+, and you could even argue A-, he excels in a couple of the little areas. Net ratings, he's actually second on the team after Sengun, so clearly the Rockets are better with him on the court than off. That's a consistent trend. I think, a high IQ guy with a ton of size that spaces the floor and is respected as a shooter just provides lots of value that's hard to quantify in the box score. So I think that's what the differential reflects. And also his willingness to take and ability to make big shots, which he has late in the Oklahoma City, Detroit, and now Milwaukee games when he hit the go-ahead 3 on Sunday against the Bucks. I mean, there's value in that. Like, role players don't always get a lot of touches, and if you get off to a cold start, you need to have that Mario Ellie or Robert Horry in you, that willingness to, if you get the ball in a tight spot in the fourth quarter and your team needs you to put up a shot because it's in the flow of the offense and you don't know if you're going to get a better look against a tight defense, you need to let it fly. And Jabari, even on bad nights, and this is in contrast, I think, to times the last couple of years when he was just finding his footing in the NBA and might get a little bit tentative. No, this year he's letting them fly. So I would say just looking at his individual statistics relative to expectations, I would say B, but I'm going to go B plus because the differential and the the big shot intangible, you have to adjust for that. I'll go B plus, but if you want to say A minus, which you did, I can't argue with you either. I think that's fair. Let's move on. Who should I go to? We'll go another quickie. Clint Capella. I'm going to give him a solid B. He's playing right about what I would expect. The touch isn't what you would love it to be, but at the same time, this is a guy who's been in the NBA for a decade, so I'm not sure what you could expect at this point relative to a guy who's making $7 million a year and is your third string center behind Alperen Sengun and Steven Adams. Like, it's a luxury. We saw the game that Steven missed in Memphis and Clint was able to step in and the Rockets didn't miss a beat. And that's going to be really important over the balance of 82 games. And it could be even more important as the season progresses. Like, the Rockets have not had a back-to-back at this point. They have a lot in the second half of the year. So having that depth behind Steven Adams could be even more important as the year progresses. And perhaps that could boost Clint into the A range once he needs to play more. And I'm sure second half of the year, the Rockets will want to make sure they keep Steven Adams in check so that he's as close to 100% as possible for the playoffs. To this point, I would say Clint's been pretty much exactly what I suspected. Last couple of games, he's only played in the first half because they've been super high leverage. So it's one of those, give him a cameo, try and steal some minutes in the first half, and second half, ride your super high leverage guys, which he's not in that tier. But yeah, he's been a very good third string center, capable of being a backup center. It's great to have him back. Doesn't really make any mistakes. Doesn't make a ton of plays, but he's a good rebounder. He's a steady presence. Doesn't do anything stupid. High IQ. Yeah, it's exactly what you would expect for Clint Capella, and so I give him a solid B.
Yeah, on Clint, there's not really a lot to say, but I'll give him a B plus just because I can't give him an A due to low usage. I'll give him a B plus more so because within the minutes that he's been given, he's been actually really productive. Like, if you scale it up to, I'm not gonna use per 36. I'm gonna use per 100, even though I should use per 75. I mean, but per 100, he's averaging 20 points a game, 24 rebounds, 3 blocks and 2 steals and 3 blocks, which obviously not scalable at all. I'm just saying, like, for the minutes that he has played, he's productive. He's playing, I think, 10 minutes a game or 9 minutes a game. Yeah, 10 minutes a game. He's averaging 4 points, 5 rebounds, 3 offensive rebounds a game. Like, you're playing 10 minutes and you're getting 3 offensive rebounds. It's kind of insane production. He's getting 0.7 blocks a game on 10 minutes. If you played 20, he'd be getting 1.5. For the role that he's been tasked to play, he's really made the most out of those minutes. There's some, wonky low lights in which he's trying to shoot some kind of hook shots or stuff like that he's not even grazing the rim with. But I think those are really few and far between. He is shooting 80% from the free throw line, which is obviously, for a 5, but still great that he's hitting them. But for the role that he has, I don't think I can't go lower than, I can't even an A because the role is small, but I can't go lower than a B plus because it could be worse. And people say, oh, it's a small sample and it's very short minutes that has more energy to give it his all. At the same time, really small minutes makes it tough for it to be in a rhythm. And we saw that with backup centers that we've had, or third string centers that we've had over the years. Obviously not as good as Clint, but I do think that there's value to him staying ready, and I do think he's going to play, really important role as the season goes along and we deal with injuries. So yeah, he's obviously not what he was before, but he's still very useful center. But moving on from Clint, which I think was pretty kind of a gimme, I'm actually, I know everybody's waiting for KD. I'm gonna hold off for a little bit more because I want to touch on Steven Adams. As far as the grade goes, I'm gonna give him an A minus. Not really because of his play, but more because of what the expectation was going into the season. What I mean is, I think if it was about a split, he'd get a higher grade. But my expectation was already pretty high. He is still a game wrecker in what he does. He's still someone who generates space for everybody else just by existing. He's still someone who completely warps the rebounding strategy for the other team. And he's currently grabbing 5 offensive rebounds a game, playing 23 minutes a night. Like that's a career, not a career high. He's had one season with with actual 5. He's at 4.8 right now, but he was playing 34 minutes a game at that point. He's now playing 22 and grabbing 5 offensive rebounds a game, which is absolutely insane. And I'll add on to that he's having a career high field goal percentage. So he's, obviously most of them are dunks, right? And some of those, reverse layups around the rim that all bigs know. And I know that comes from the types of shots that he's taking. Still impressive. And most important of all, he is shooting, obviously not sustainable, but he's shooting 82% from the line, which is a far cry from a 46% the year before and 36% the year before that. Like, if he can be like Steven Adams, if he can be a 60% free throw shooter, like that's a game changer, because if you play hack a Steven Adams or hack a Adams playing late in games and he's shooting 60%, you're likely not getting enough value for that strategy to be effective. Like if you're getting 1 point, 60% would be 1.2 points per possession on each foul that you take on him. That keeps him on the floor, and that makes it so he can't be kind of invalidated in the playoff series. So yeah, I think he's played great. His grade just isn't high because I already expected him to be a big part of what we do. He's just come out and proven to be what I expected him to be, and which is awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to go B+. I expected a lot of this. And by the way, I should have clarified. I mentioned B sort of being the expectation grade, and I'm sure some that are sticklers will say, well, wouldn't C be the expectation? No, this is a very good team. Like, there's a reason why we were optimistic, and we're trying to be a fun, optimistic podcast. So no, I'm not going to take it like super literally and say, oh, C's in the middle on the curve. No, I think for most of these guys, B is if they're performing relative to expectations. And, with Steven, certainly compared to his regular season stats a year ago, he's well above that. But I expected that go again based on what we saw during the playoffs, the fact that he's getting healthier. Now he's, multiple years removed from knee surgery. And yeah, you already, stole my main point, which was the free throws. That's the bump for me from B to B+. Like, the rebounding is phenomenal. I expected it to be phenomenal. Offensive rebounding, he's the best in the game. But defensively, I think he's moved a little bit better than I expected. So maybe that's a little bit of a bump. But it's the free throws that, to me, and it's a small sample, but it's all we have. Even if the 80 is inflated, as you mentioned, if it's just enough to take the Haka Adams out of the playbook, that's a big deal. So for me, Steven is a wonderful team player. The net ratings don't lie. He consistently impacts winning far beyond what his traditional stats would suggest. But yeah, the free throw shooting to this point, albeit in a small sample. And I should mention, I thought against the Bucks on Sunday, he had some nice finishes inside off of passes from KD. Like, KD would draw that second defender in the mid-range, and he would lob it over the top. And Steven did a nice job of finishing, and I think it might be he has a little bit more athleticism than he did last season, even in the playoffs. Like, I don't think he necessarily can create the separation a few months ago that he can now. He can get up a little bit higher, and that can make all the difference as to whether that shot actually gets through the rim and doesn't get blocked. So I give Steven a B+. You can certainly argue for that. Overall, he's a winning player. I guess I'm a little, not more down on him, but just it's more reflective of the fact that I just expected it from Steven Adams going in. I was so high. I mentioned going into the season, like, one reason why some of the models I thought were too bearish on the Rockets is people were expecting Steven Adams based on the regular season numbers last year. And in reality, relative to the 52-30 team, he's basically an off-season addition when you factor in what he's bringing to this season's team relative to the 52-30 formula from a year ago. So yeah, very good year for Steven. All right, I'm going to go to one that there could be some variance, and boy, I admit there may be some recency bias to this. I'm going to go A- for Reed Shepherd. Like, the net ratings, and I know I'm contradicting myself a little bit because the per minute stats don't suggest Reed being worthy of this grade. But the most important thing, and we didn't see this last year, I know small sample size theater, but he was billed as a generational shooting prospect. Sam Vecini was among many people that said he's perhaps the best shooting prospect since Steph Curry. And we needed to see sustained evidence at the NBA level that the three-point shot was going to translate. Well, we're 9 games in, and he's shooting almost 50% from three. So just that peace of mind that, Paulo, you've been on this in the past. Like, the shooting, for whatever reason, hasn't always translated with Rockets perimeter prospects. It is with Reed. Like, the three-point shooting, and as the year progresses and he gets more confident, the net's not even moving. Like, you can tell this is an elite shooter. So I'm grading Reed on a little bit of a curve because I didn't expect him to be a winning player already at 21 years old in year 2 and with the obvious defensive deficiencies. So for the three-point shooting to translate to the extent that it is, that's just, for me at least, a huge peace of mind that in the long run, this is going to work out. He needs more time. He's far from a finished product. The defense, there's a lot to work on, but between the shooting and the IQ and the handle, which is better than I thought and a ton better than last year, in my opinion, I'm pretty bullish on what I've seen. And the reason I'm going A-, the shooting, the peace of mind factor there, but also the fact that he's played so well when the lights are at their brightest. Like these 2 games in San Antonio and Milwaukee, these were statement games, and these were high leverage minutes. Like, he kept you in those games. KD said after the Milwaukee win that Reed is the reason we won. Those were huge plays when it mattered most. I think in the Milwaukee game in the fourth quarter, he had 3 steals and a block. The kick ahead, like, there's so many little things that he does that you can't coach. So I know the on-off splits aren't great. I know the zone has not looked great, although I still think some of that is Ime. You don't have to run zone quite as much as he has with Reed. I'd like to see, and maybe that's something that this homestand will show when the opponents are a little bit weaker. Maybe they experiment with Reed a little bit more in man situations and we see how he holds up. But I just think between the shooting, the high leverage, there was a great stat in the NBA.com power rankings that Reed has already played more than double his crunch time minutes from a year ago. Last year, he was at under 5. This year, he's already at more than 11. So kudos to Ime Udoka for trusting him, for giving him a longer runway. But he's delivering. Like, ever since opening night, he's actually 21 of 41 from 3, which is above 50%. This is a grade that is admittedly on a curve, and that's the whole point of this exercise because we're talking about the expectations going into this year. But if you had told me that Reed would be at almost 50% from 3 on decent volume because he is Reed Shepherd, and he's making winning plays on the road against the Spurs and the Bucks, he's not a finished product. There's a long way to go defensively. But overall, year 2, the first 10 games, coming off what was a very underwhelming rookie season, I'm excited. I'm going to go A-. There's probably some recency bias, but whatever. I'm buying Reed stock right now. Paulo, how about you? Where are you at on Reed?
It's a bit tough for me to give him a grade because on one hand, I don't want to overreact to what is, probably 3 good games from the last 3 games. I don't want to, at the same time, my expectations going into the season were really low. You guys know, like, because the expectations were low, the grade should be higher because I don't want to overreact. Perhaps the grade should be lower. I think I'm going to go with a B, just a straight B. I think if you showed me his stat line before the season, I would have taken it. So probably that means it should be a B plus because I would have taken it earlier before if he's told me before the season started, right? Well, let's go into more details. Obviously, it's not just that he's shooting 50% from 3 or 48%. Like 44% from 3 from a great shooter is a sustainable mark. Luke Kennard has done it. Curry has done it. Like great shooters can shoot 44% from 3 in the NBA. So his current 48% mark might not be that far off. The biggest takeaway, though, is it's 5 threes a game for someone who's playing 22 minutes a game. And these are, like he's not someone who's ball hogging. Like he's a high percentage of, well, not only a high percentage of his shots, he takes 9 shots, 5 of them are threes, but also he's not someone who's, getting to self-create a lot. So he's taking threes like basically every chance that he gets. And he is making them and he's really confident about it. And we've seen the last 2 games, like there are times where he's just pulling up from, shots that he wasn't taking last season. So the offense looks great. I think you also got to touch on the fact that he's averaging 3 assists to 1 turnover, which is great as well. And if you can scale that up, we'll see how that, eventually translates going forward. I just think that the handle looks a lot better and the turnovers show that. And he's perhaps the safest handle that we have on the team right now. So yeah, that's a big development. He's obviously 6'2", which makes it easier, but still. The defense is what keeps me from giving it an A+. If the defense was good, I would have given him an A+. He might be that type of guy who's never quite above average at playing straight up, this disciplined defense. But he might be good enough that when you combine that with his, the chaos he creates with his steals and blocks, that he might be a positive defender who, while being an incredible offensive player, that might be his ceiling, right? That might be the formula. The defense has not looked good early in the season when he's having to play, straight up disciplined defense. But I also think that part of that is also that we kind of leave him on an island a lot. Like I can off the top of my head name you 4 or 5 possessions, and this is me not remembering every single one, where he's guarding a mismatch, like a serious mismatch, like Giannis or Wemby or guys are clearly bigger than him, and we're not sending help. And so I gotta think that some of it is scheme as well. And I'm not sure the zone is quite the answer to. I think it's too much zone, and I don't think Reed needs that much zone. I do think that we're not kind of adapting our defensive game players to the opponents that we're facing. Like, we played Milwaukee, and I'm sorry, this kind of goes away from talking about Reed for a bit, but we played Milwaukee and we let Giannis go completely ham on us. Like, he's clearly their only threat. And we didn't build a wall. We weren't throwing different defenders at him. It didn't seem like we had a game plan defensively to specifically beat the Bucks. Beforehand, with Wemby, it did look like we had a specific game plan to beat the Spurs, but at the same time, when that started not working, we didn't adapt at all. And I think when you play a team like OKC, in which, Reed is one switch away and Shea is really good, he's just going to pick him apart. Letting him get picked apart is probably not the best way. Like, I feel like Reed's been left on an island a little bit too much, and at the same time, we've played a little bit too much zone with him. Like, I think there's a happy middle ground in which if the other team has a starter guard, they probably need a little bit of help. You got to help them a little bit more, to run a little bit more zone. Perhaps you run some more aggressive schemes and some more aggressive blitzing schemes. And at the same time, when he's being targeted on a mismatch by a player that's much bigger, perhaps you can help and you can chase around the ball for the closeouts, which is something that we do a lot less this season than we did last season. Like, I feel like we're not necessarily doing a really good job of making it so Reed's not targeted as much as he is, as he has been. So that factors into my grade as well. I think the highlight plays the steals, the blocks, and not only the steals and the blocks, but the fact that when he gets a steal or a block, he's very good at capitalizing on it and turning it into points. Not necessarily a fast break that ends up on a reset half-court possession, but you talk about the pass to, I believe I'm not sure if it's the Menard or Eason on the break against the Bucks. Like, that was really impressive, but it's not the only time. Like, he's really good. There's also the kick out 3 where he repositions late in the fourth quarter as well. And there's been many plays like that. Like, he's good at translating that transition advantage into actual points. Combine that with his shooting, combine that with the fact that I think his defense might be getting a little bit too overexposed because we're not really tailoring to having him on the floor at all, which, it's obviously not a star player. You're not going to change your entire scheme because of him. It might not be worth that, but it's worth it to play, normal defense for when you have a small guard on the floor and what that entails. So, yeah, I'm gonna go with a B+ because it's above my expectations, because my expectations were low. I think there's a big positive, which is, like you said, it seems to be confirmed, knock on wood, that the shooting's real. And with Robert's prospects, you never know. That it might just be generational. It might just be, best shooter since Steph Curry or something like that, considering the shots he takes. The defense does not look great. The activity has, and I think the rest can be mitigated by helping him a little bit more on the defensive end as well. guess I gotta transition. I'm doing this thing when I'm going too long on the first guy, and then I don't leave myself enough time to go for the second guy. But I think the only guy we have Tyrese and KD. Do I want to leave KD to the end? No, I'm gonna leave Tyrese to the end. I'll talk about KD. So KD has just been, well, basically KD. He's had a couple of tough games. The Spurs game, there's been a couple of off games there. But, KD was never going to be an offensive hub. Like, he's never been James Harden, right? He's a great scorer, but he's not a great playmaker. He's an okay playmaker. Like, he's a smart player, but his execution of passes is not necessarily the greatest. And he sometimes takes the tick too long to punish what he's getting double-teamed, which leads to turnovers. Beyond that, I think it's been as good as you can expect it to be. I mean, he's, 25 points per game. He's had a couple of 30 bombs. He's not necessarily he hasn't been a ball hog at all. He takes his shots within the offense. He's kept us afloat in games where we needed someone to keep us in the game. He's taken us home in games where we've needed it closer at the end of the fourth quarter. So he's been everything I expected him to be. I'm gonna give him an A because he's KD. Well, what else can I give you? Like, you can't really be that much better than what I expected you to be. Because I expected you to be an all-time great, and it turns out you're still an all-time great even at 37 years old. Like, you're still as good as I could have expected KD to be. Beyond that, I've been impressed by two things. The first is his hustle. I feel like defense, not that I thought KD wasn't gonna hustle on defense, but running in transition, even on offense, taking, a few driving lanes, like going through contact, he's shooting a lot of free throws, running in transition, even defensively rotating. I know sometimes he takes some possessions off, or he makes some defensive mistakes, but for the most part, hustling, blocking shots at the rim, got dunked on by Wemby because he went to try to block a shot that I don't think many superstars in the league would have tried to block. I don't think many superstars in the league would have been put in a position to be dunked on by Wemby. I don't think the media took that and ran with it, but that could have been, a big deal. So, yeah, as far as KD goes, I think he's been awesome. The other factor that I was going to touch on it is he seems to really be enjoying his time here. Like, you look at his mannerisms on the court, like someone makes a big play and he's hype. Like, he's really hype. He seems to have taken Reed Shepard under his wing. He seems to have taken Jabari Smith-Jr. under his wing as well. Like, this is not a superstar riding into the sunset. He's someone who's trying to win, and he's someone who's getting fired up on a possession-to-possession basis when this team does its typical highlight-type plays, which this team is pretty prone to highlights. And he's all in emotionally as well. And I think that's a big deal. Like, this is not superstar, looking and seeing, hey, this probably is the team that gives me the best chance at a ring, but it's probably a far cry, right? I'm probably, seeing off my career here, gonna try to win, but not gonna try too hard. No, it seems like AD is fully bought in, both from an emotional standpoint, from an effort standpoint, and it feels like he really, really enjoys playing with us. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if some fan from another team's gonna tell me that this happens with everybody and that eventually he leaves on bad terms or whatever they may call it. But from my point of view, he has surpassed my expectations from a leadership and then from a emotional investment standpoint as well. Besides his play, because his play has been, he's KD. What else do you want?
Yeah, I'll go B. Like, I largely agree with all of your points. He's been Kevin Durant. He hasn't fallen short of expectations, but I also don't think, at least yet, that he's overachieved them, which is why I come back to B, roughly in line with expectations. I am a little more alarmed than you are about the turnovers, simply because his assists have dipped. Like, most of his career, he's been at about 3 turnovers per game, so it's not that alarming. But the fact that he's having the turnovers while also not having as many assists, I would need to dive deeper into the data to see his touches relative to last season. But it does feel like some of the more baffling turnovers have been up because the assists going down. I don't think he's being selfish, but I think it probably reflects that, and it makes sense given the diversity of playmakers on this team. He's not quite as high in usage rate as he has been in previous years. And so in that context, some of the more baffling turnovers can be pretty frustrating. Not terribly so. I'm looking up his usage rate. He's at 26.4 this year. For his career, he's at 30. He was at about 29 the last couple of years in Phoenix. So not a dramatic decline, but a little bit of a dip. And so that's why I do dock him a little bit for the turnovers. I think he can clean it up. Now, one thing you didn't point out that I think is worth noting, the average free throws going back up to 7.9 per game. That's his most in over 10 years. So to go from about 5.5 the last 2 years in Phoenix to almost 8 per game this year, and of course he's still lights out at making them at over 87% on the season, that's really promising. So even if you worry a little bit about the turnovers, at the same time, him showing an ability, and perhaps it speaks to, the diversity of options on this team. He gets himself more easily into advantage situations where defenses have no choice but to foul him. Regardless of the reason, the productivity is up. So even if you worry a little bit about the assist-to-turnover ratio, the fact that he's getting to the line much more frequently for a guy who is as lethal at making free throws as Kevin is, to me, you have to reward him for that. And then the reason I can't give him higher than a B, we've seen glimpses, but other than the game against Milwaukee, he hasn't done too much landing the plane. Like, he's had moments, but generally he hasn't been the guy late in close games. And honestly, the Rockets have lost, as you pointed out earlier in the pod, Paulo, most of the close games. Obviously, OKC, they had a tough time getting it to Kevin in the fourth quarter and overtimes. Detroit, he had some really big moments early in the fourth quarter, but then down the stretch, they initiated offense through Sengun. A little bit of the same story against Dallas. They did win it, but after KD had a couple of threes midway through the quarter, they doubled him midway through. Now, I don't think all of that is on Kevin Durant. Some of that is on the Rockets to develop counters. And I think we saw that a little bit more against the Bucks. I thought KD's post-game interview was revealing. He talked about how he thought the spacing was a lot better, having one or two guys at the top of the key rather than 3 or 4. In other words, get your shooters to the corners and give KD and Sengun or whoever the guys are involved in your main actions at the top of the key more room to operate. He needs to be more crisp with the decisions when those double teams come, when those traps come. I think he'll get there. What he showed against the Bucks is clear evidence that he's still the same KD in terms of being lights out late in a close game, and the closer the Rockets didn't have when it was the Jalen Green-led version of a year ago. By the way, how terrible is it for Jalen? Feel awful for the guy to have that great debut and then injure the hamstring again. But as far as KD, I think we'll give him a higher grade as the year moves along. But to this point, the Milwaukee game is the only one where he's truly been the closer, at least late in the fourth quarter, be it scoring or passing, generating those high leverage buckets to get the Rockets to the finish line. So, one game out of 9, it's not bad. I'm not docking him for it. But at the same time, he hasn't stolen games for the Rockets late quite to the level that I would give him, an A for. And I think he's probably going to get there. So this is just a first 9 games. Kevin Durant, no disappointment, but I also can't give him an A just yet. I think KD is capable of more, and my guess is that as the year progresses, he's going to do that, because I think a lot of the issues, especially the late game execution, just come down to, he's integrating himself onto a new team. His teammates and his coaches are trying to figure out how to best use him. I think that's going to get better as the season moves along, and we're already seeing evidence based in the Milwaukee game that the Rockets and KD are figuring it out. So B to this point, but I think there's plenty of room for upward mobility. And then the last grade, Tari's a tricky one for me. I'm going to go B+. Superficially, I want to go A because he's shooting over 50% from 3, and he's played in all 9 games. So the big concerns with Tari, in the macro, were obviously the durability coming off the leg issues the last 2 years, and how consistent is the 3-point stroke. To this point, he's cleared both of those checkpoints in a big way. But at the same time, his on-off rating amongst the rotation guys is amongst the worst. They are minus 6.6 in terms of the differential. So I'm torn. There can be some statistical noise to that, especially early in the year. But it does suggest, and the eye test sort of tells me the same thing, that for whatever reason, he hasn't been quite as impactful defensively as we've seen in previous years. I also don't think he's been quite as effective on 2-pointers in terms of finishing at the rim and driving. So I think in the big picture, and it's why I do give him a B+, the uptick in 3-point shooting and durability is most important, because if he clears those 2 bars, then he's got enough to his game that he should be okay. But I also can't discount the metrics either. So that's why I come to a B plus. I want to give him more than that, but I just I can't just totally ignore what the metrics are saying, and so that's where I'll end on B plus. Paulo, bring us home. What's your Tari grade and why?
Yeah, it's gonna be harsh, and it's not gonna be lower because of the shooting. Because the shooting has kept us in games at times, but also the defense has fallen off a cliff. If you ask me, I'm gonna give him a B minus. That's really close to a C plus. I disagree with one of the things you said. I think offensively, he's just a straight up better player than he was last season. I think his finishing at the rim is a lot better. I do think that the stats are skewed because he has shot one. I'm looking at it right now. 1, 5, 6, 7. He's shot 8 mid-range shots. He hasn't made a single one of them. And it's so early in the season that if you take 8 2-point tries away, which are misses, he'd be 17 of 26, which would be awesome at the rim.
Looking at the 2-point stats, he's down from 55.7 to 50. But yeah, I mean, those can be wonky early in the year, to your point.
Yeah, he's currently 65% at the rim, which is really good. And I do think that he's had some tougher finishes than he typically does, and less open dunks than he typically does. But that being said, honestly, the shooting looks a lot better, and it's going in a lot more. But that's where it kind of ends as far as positive things go for Tari this season. His defensive impact has fallen off a cliff. He's gone from 1.7 steals a game and nearly a block to 1 steal a game and half a block. He's not the game wrecker he used to be. His defense, basically, he's not as locked in. I don't know what has happened. It feels to me like the combination of him being outside of the top 100 for ESPN or whatever it may be that was really bugging him, plus not getting his extension, has really gotten into his head. He's turning the ball over more than he's ever had by a large margin. Like, he's playing the same minutes he was last season, and he's turning the ball over twice as much. Like, it seems like someone told him, we've got, like, if you want to be recognized, you've got to be a scorer, and he's not a scorer. I'm sorry. Like, there's some things he can do, can be a connective piece, and sometimes score a little bit. This team is plenty good enough at scoring. We don't need you to be a scorer. We need you to be a smart player with the touches that you do get, which are mostly off of kickouts and attacking closeouts. The Rockets don't need you to be a shot creator at all. Like, the Rockets need Tari Eason to be the game wrecker he has been defensively, and all of the impact metrics, and everybody who is smart in the NBA landscape values what Tari Eason brought to the table the first 3 years of his career. I guarantee you, if you go ask those same people and they look at this season, they're going to tell you he's fallen off a cliff, because he has. I was going to ask you, because I just think it's an interesting question, and I think most people will answer it incorrectly. I think if you ask most people if he's had a better or worse season than last season, I think a lot of people would have said he's having a better season because of 3-point shooting. Even with the 3-point shooting, to me, he's had a worse season across the board besides that shooting, and besides the leap that he seems to have made at finishing at the rim. That does not help outweigh what he has fallen off defensively and what his decision making has been. Like, he's not generating turnovers. He's not being as locked down as he was before. The Rockets need Tari Eason to be the version of Tari Eason that he was the first 3 years, and that's what's going to get him paid. Him being an offensive Vulcan is not going to get him paid at the end of the season by some team. Like, even if he does, like, he also handed went really well, and he's averaging 16 points a game, but he's playing as poor defense as he has this season.
I think you're probably right in the overall impact, but I do think there's a little bit of an extenuating circumstance in that a lot of his minutes off the bench are mirrored by Reed Shepherd and Steven Adams or Clint Capella, i.e. double big. So I do think that the lineups when he is on the floor, it's a little bit more difficult to get those steals and blocks, those home run plays, because there's such a clear deficiency, or they're playing zone. There's such a clear way for the opposing team to attack. So I guess that's the difference between me and you. Like, I don't think you're wrong when you look at the data, and by the eye test, I agree with you. He's not as impactful as he was the last couple of years, even with the leg injury. However, I do think you have to give him, besides the obvious small sample size caveat, I do think you have to give him a little bit of grace because of who he's playing with. I think that complicates it a little bit.
No, I'm with you. The counter that lineups play a factor into the defense. Still, like, we're watching the games with our eyes, and I know you said you agree with me as well. Like, he has not seemed as impactful as he was. He does not seem as locked in as he was defensively last season. Like, Tarisin was probably my favorite player last season on the Rockets, and he just doesn't seem anything like himself. You're seeing, like, across the board, fouls are down, which you might think that fouls are down are a good thing. I think fouls are down because he's not as locked in as he used to be. And when you play, physical defense, you give up fouls. Turnovers are double what they've been. Blocks are down, steals are down. You can argue that, yeah, I can take the blocks and the steals being done because they're scoring more easily, but still, like you're talking about, rebounding is down. Offensive rebounding in specific, which is mostly an effort metric, is down as well. I know the Rockets have missed less shots. That plays a role, but that's down as well. I think he has clearly taken a leap offensively, finishing at the rim. But if that comes at the expense of the defensive impact that he has had in previous seasons, and I think the counter to what you said is he's had that defensive impact across the first 2 seasons of his career, and the first 2 of them he was playing with worse defenses than even what we are doing now with Argentina, I would argue. And so he was still he still stood out in those teams, and he's not standing out right now. So yeah, I would Tari's going to be my rougher grade of the bunch. Like, I think it's a B- / a C+ for Tari, and I hope that his mentality shifts back to what it was last season, because I do think that a part of it has to be like what happened in the offseason with him being outraged that he was out of the top 100 and him being outraged, not sure if he's outraged, but he was clearly upset that he did not get extended. Like, the Rockets are a very analytically driven front office. At least from the Rockets, you're not going to get more money from being a better scorer, the worst defensive player, and worse in impact metrics across the board than you would by being the version of yourself that you were last season. If you were the version of yourself that you were last season and you played 65 games or 70 games, I think the Rockets would have probably given you the contract that you wanted. I think the doubt was his health, not his place out. So yeah, and I'm not sure if he's going to convince a lot of other teams to pay him more based on scoring, because as an in free agency, if you're going after a scorer, you're probably not going to go after the scoring upside of 24-year-old Tari Eason, as rough as that might sound. You're probably going to go after someone like Cam Thomas, or someone like Kaminga, or someone like that. Not necessarily. I just think that it's been completely off the mark what we need Tari to be and what Tari has been, even though he's made a lot of timely shots. But once again, if you can't get stops, it's short-sighted to be too happy about 50% from 3 when the defense is falling off, because 50% from 3 is not going to hold, and the defense has to get better. So yeah.
Well, the only counters that I would make, even if the overall defenses were worse, and I think you have to go back to maybe the first season of Ime Udoka, more realistically, Tari's rookie season with Steven Silas. I mean, last year, and I'd argue the second half of Ime's first year, were definitely better defenses overall than what we've seen. Even if the overall defense is a little bit better, which I'm not sure is the case, I think it's offset by there being such a clear avenue to attack with Reed and or the double big, i.e. the zone and the ability to shoot threes, in a way there wasn't. So I just think stylistically, there's more of an easy way for opponents to know exactly what they want to do. And many times that action is away from Tari Eason relative to his first couple of seasons. And the other point that I would make, I think playing with Reed Sheppard, Reed's game is so dependent on making those home run plays defensively that if you're one of the other 4 players, it probably makes you be a little bit more disciplined, just because you can't have 2 or 3 guys all swinging for the fences, or otherwise you're just going to be a complete liability on that back line on a lot of possessions. So I think sort of feeling out how those 2 guys can play together, that could be a little bit of it as well. With that said, that's just nitpicking. By and large, I agree with you. By the eye test, he's not as impactful. And so, yeah, you can talk me into a lower grade. I guess it's just for me going into the season, he's been so, out kicking the coverage with regards to what I was watching, that perhaps I'm being a little too optimistic and overlooking the clear deficiencies in areas that we thought were strengths based on Tari's first 3 seasons. All right, winding down the pod. We got to be very quick here because we've been over an hour. I thought this would be a quick pod, but come on. We haven't had a full show in a couple of weeks, so I guess I should have expected it. 60 seconds or less, the 3-game homestand coming up. What's one variable that you're watching? You've got Wizards, Blazers, and Orlando Magic. Wizards are a team you should clearly beat. Portland and Orlando, competent teams, but neither are great. You'll be favored by, I suspect, at least 6 or 7 points in both of those games. So I think 3-0 would be the expectation. You can live with 2-1. Anything 1-2 or worse is a disaster considering the schedule. This is a stretch at home with no back-to-backs where you should feast. In terms of keys to watch for, I mentioned it leading off the pod in our Ime Udoka grading segment, so I'll end it here. They've got to get the 3-point math closer to parity, because when you're playing a lesser team, the one way that your perceived advantage can be eroded is if you're losing by math. And so these are the types of opponents that I think you can get off a lot of threes against. I think you should prioritize it to make sure that you're not leaving yourself vulnerable, because as long as the math is close to level, the Rockets should have more talent than these teams. So in terms of what to watch for me, it's the 3-point math discrepancy that needs to get closer to parity this week. I know the Rockets are an analytics-friendly organization, so it's something that internally I think they're already aware of. They have a couple of practice days going in, so I think that should be a focal point. I think it will be a focal point, and I think especially against the Wizards, who are a bad defensive team, and the Rockets should be able to get whatever they want. I think you'll see a few more threes. I think that's the priority. The accuracy is already there. Now the volume is the priority. Paulo, what are you looking for on this homestand? 60 seconds or less.
Yeah, not gonna get too deep into it. I'm actually not that worried about the 3-point math, and I am a very pro analytics type of guy, but I do think that our offense has not been the problem. I think part of the reason why we're shooting such a high percentage is because we're taking really quality looks. So I think I don't want to mess with the offense too much, other than reducing turnovers. I think that's a conversation we can have later down the line as we see a bigger sample. At the same time, as far as the 3 games go, I think you gotta go 3-0. The Magic are an awful team this year. Like, they're 4-6, I believe. They're currently playing the Timberwolves, the Trailblazers. Sorry. So one of those teams will have one extra loss going into the Rockets game. The Wizards, you just gotta blow them out, and you can let them hang in the game. I think you should go 3-0. As far as trends, I'm looking for the defense, and I'm looking for. Orlando is a little bit of a gimmicky team. Even though they have Desmond Bain and he typically cooks the Rockets, the spacing is just not there. Paulo's having a terrible start to the season. Farns the same thing. So I'm looking like how the Rockets handle the Wizards' first round pick from last year. Alves, he's had some pop-off games to start the season. We'll see how, but he doesn't seem like the type of player that could punish the Rockets a lot. Like, he's settling for a lot of post play, a lot of fadeaways, a lot of shots that you can bother with length. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. But they should be 3-0, and I think it would be pretty worrying if they're not. The only game I think is semi-acceptable to lose, but not really acceptable to lose, would actually be the Timberwolves, not the Magic, because the Trailblazers. Sorry, I keep messing those two up. They did beat the Thunder. They did beat the Nuggets. They did beat the Lakers as well. So they seem to be a pretty for-real team, even though they're 5-4 and they've lost some stinkers to teams that are not as good. But their schedule has been pretty tough. They've lost to the Clippers, the Heat, the Timberwolves. But they've beaten some who we think will be good teams as well. So the Timberwolves, the Trailblazers, Jesus Christ, might be for real. So that might be a Bucks type game in which, well, it turns out that this team is actually just better than we expected. And turns out that they're going to be a playoff team. So yeah. Going into it, I expect 3-0. I would be really sad if it's not 3-0, but I could accept a loss to the Blazers depending on how the game goes.
And there's no Scoot Henderson, which is obviously helping them win a lot of games.
Don't do that to me.
I know. Sorry. Anyway, we'll wrap it here. And as far as plugs, you guys know the drill by now, but LaunchPod790 on Twitter. And if you hit up that link tree in the bio, that's got everything you need as far as Clutch Fans, Sports Talk 790, USA Today's Rockets Wire. If you want to consume their content, just go to LaunchPod790 on Twitter, hit up the link tree, and also has where you can find us as far as all the major distributors, YouTube, all that good stuff. LaunchPod790 on Twitter, hit up the link tree, and of course you can follow Paulo and myself at Ben DuBose and at Paulo Alves NBA. All right, that'll do it for tonight. On behalf of Paulo Alves, I'm Ben DuBose. Thanks to all of you guys for listening, and please come back soon for more new episodes of the Rockets Launch Pod.